career, business, life, and relationships. This is the Growth to Freedom Show. Now, here is your host, Dan Kuschell.
Welcome to growthtofreedom.com. We're shaking things up today. We're talking about disruption. We're talking about innovation to help you transform your life, business, and relationships. And thanks for making us part of your day. We've got a great show today scheduled for you. We've got Dr. Cristy Lopez back in the house.
Yes.
Yes, welcome
Great to be
back. Yes, and we've got a special theme today. We're going to talk about Mastery 2.0. You know what? If you missed 1.0, you can just fly right by it, right?
Yes.
So we're going Mastery 2.0, the Playbook for personal power. What does that mean? Well, you're going to hear about what that means. You're also going to learn how to get more access to growth, capabilities, strategy to be able to help build your bigger future. And our show today is presented by doneforyousolutions.com. That's doneforyousolutions.com. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to connect. We've got a lot of chatter going on Twitter, so make sure you jump in the game. You can join us at Dan_Kuschell. That's Dan_Kuschell, or you can email us at info@growthtofreedom.com. That's info@growthtofreedom.com. So today's show is inspired in part by this magazine issue. I do a lot of reading, Dr. Lopez.
Yes.
And the cover says, "Are you a rebel?" So I have a question for you as you're watching, as you're listening. Are you a rebel, right? You know, not the type of person that walks around and has the WTF attitude, but has a rebel attitude. It says, "Rebels wanted, must be willing to find a way around social conventions, tired products, and apparent laws of the business universe. Conformists need not apply." So if you're a conformist, shut the show off. This is definitely not for you. This is a show where we're disrupting the status quo. It's about innovation. It's about helping you transform you to be your better you. Now, last night as we were preparing for the show, we were getting into some interesting things, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I think we'll just dive off that diving board right now. I think we'll dive into the deep end.
Okay.
Right out of the gate. And there's some myths and misconceptions
Yes.
about therapy, about coaching, about psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I think about it, I don't know if you're watching or listening, right? Do you feel overwhelmed at times? Technology theoretically is supposed to make life simpler,
Mm-hmm.
right? At least that's what they sold us. I don't know. Is that a bill of goods or what? But technology by itself creates overwhelm, right? And then you have psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you bring the mastery of psychology and the mastery of technology together, I think that's where you can see accelerated growth, accelerated learning, accelerated significance, all these different types of things overall. So talk about what you deal with, Dr. Lopez. I mean, you've worked with thousands and thousands of clients. What are some of the misconceptions that people have when they walk into your office for coaching or counseling or seeing a psychologist that you hear, or maybe the questions, the doubts that people have in their head?
Yeah. Human nature is human nature. So I actually get a lot of the same exact wording when people come in with things that they're asking me. And one of the top things is straight out asking me, am I crazy? So people will ask, am I crazy? Am I normal? Am I wrong? Am I a bad person? I mean, these really kind of extreme type labels that they're giving themselves, and and a lot of times this is like when they very first come in, they're asking this, and sometimes they'll ask it kind of later on in the process. But
now, when you face the people asking these things, are you seeing people that are like at the peak of their game, like they're at their very best, or are they usually in a questionable state, or maybe facing doubt or adversity or turmoil? Where do you see most people that ask those questions?
Yeah, well, especially on the therapy side, it's more of that. So when I first see somebody, I ask them for a little summary about what's been leading you here, okay, because usually there's a path, and it's usually over time, but then why now? Because why now are you calling me? Why now are you going to go ahead and look at this and start working on something? Because usually there's a why now that kind of pushed them over the edge, either an incident or they just kind of had a threshold build up, and then that's what happened. So that's what like finally motivated them to come. So usually and that's the whole idea, is you're here for a reason. Like there's something going on here. So we need to find out what's going on, where you're trying to go, and what's the best way to get there. So when people first come, they tend to be a little concerned that, maybe I'm crazy and that's why I'm here. Or maybe I'm wrong and that's why I need to come and seek something else.
Is there something wrong with being crazy?
Well, it depends. Yeah.
So as you're watching or listening right now, there's no accident that you're, watching or listening right now. You're here for a reason. And our goal is to bring you coaching, support, guidance, mentoring, if you will, coaching, counseling to help you be a better you. So why now? As you're watching or listening right now, where do you see yourself? Right? In order for things to change, you've got to be willing to change. In order for things to get better, you've got to be willing to do things better. In order for things to improve, guess what? I've got to be willing to improve. So what are you willing to do to make that happen? And what will happen if you take the time to learn and put these principles that Dr. Lopez, myself, a lot of the thought leaders we bring to you each and every week, bring to you and put them into place? What will happen? I mean, I perceive that you'll have more confidence, more clarity, more courage, more commitment, more freedom, more significance, more love, more opportunity to connect, more of the ability of passion, of purpose, meaning, right, of significance, being able to go out and truly transcend your life or transform or contribute to others, not only to yourself, but to contribute. A drowning person can't save a freaking drowning person,
right,
can they?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see this every day. So we've got to get ourselves grounded.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, I'm fortunate. I work with Genius Network. I've been in growth and mentoring programs. We were talking about this last night. Why do people continue on this path of seeking out help or mentors or whatever the case might be? And I think it's kind of controversial. I see it as a disruptor. I see it as an innovator tool to always be growing to new levels or next level breakthroughs. Speak to that as what you see on a regular basis with people coming to you overall. Are they just looking to get their bearings straight so that they can have the ability to have a foundation to go to another level? Or are you seeing that people come to you more times than not out of desperation versus that inspiration?
Well, it's multiple things. So sometimes people come because they think, actually, if it's like a group, like couples or families, a lot of times people come because they think the other person is wrong.
Yes.
And so they think like somehow my role is to say like, you're wrong and you're right, which again is another.
You're like the referee.
Things. Yeah. Oh, that is so not what it is. And I tell people, before they come, but they still want to elicit that. And that is not what it is. Because it's very unrealistic to think you're going to come to somebody for like an hour, unload like 10 years worth of conflict between you two or between a whole family member, and then somehow it's just miraculously going to be fixed. So really, they're very surprised to find out that I tell them, I don't even really want your whole story. I don't actually even need your whole story.
And speaking of that, this is going to be off color, so bear with us for a moment. I'm preparing you. You might want to, protect your children's ears or whatever the case might be. But the reality is it reminds me of someone, a fat person who spent, 10 years overeating. They're 70 pounds overweight. And then they show up to you as a trainer, in this case, a psychologist, coach, counselor, professional. And they walk in and go, okay, fix me. And you do one workout and they go, dum, 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 dum. Wait a minute, I didn't lose 50, 60 pounds today.
Right, yeah.
And it's more than that, isn't it? It's a process, it's a journey.
Yeah.
So I see that personally, working in personal development with weight loss, all types of stuff, that type of mindset coming, it's like a quick fix pill, one session, one thing to get done. And it really is a journey, isn't it?
It's a process, and it doesn't have to take forever, but it is a process because it's that whole thing of like, I'm not in the business to be giving fish. Like, I'm in the business to teach you how to fish because I don't want you dependent on me, and I don't believe in like career clients. Like, I don't think you need to, see me forever, every week for the rest of your life. I mean, you can always come back, and that actually is helpful. But I don't want people dependent on me, and I don't always want it to be like a crisis thing, like, oh, you come when there's a crisis and then like fix this crisis. Because there's so much to do, to teach, to learn, to transfer, to help somebody do this for themselves. Like, I guide them and I teach them, and we practice in the session, and then you practice in your real life, and then it's more and more going over to you. So so sometimes people have this thing of, like it's a magic deal, like all of a sudden I'm just supposed to fix them. It's not me fixing, it's me helping guide, and you actually do and this is the other thing, work, which you mentioned it. You have to do the work. I should not be working harder than you. And it is work. But the good news is if you do that work, things will change. So.
Things will change. And you know what? If you want to change, take a listen to what Dr. Lopez is not only sharing here, but in some of the other episodes we can get access to at growthtofreedom.com. I mean, we've had her on regularly. She's a regular expert on the show. And, the interesting part about it, I remember when, I went through my situation and we started seeing each other I saw you for counseling, and I ended up in a hospital 2 weeks after my son was born. And ultimately I sat down, and I hope this never happens to you, by the way, right? I hope that it doesn't come that you're, facing your deathbed. I signed a disclaimer. It said I had a 1 in X chance of dying on the table. And probably for the first time in a decade, I sat there and said, what do I really want, right? And I started writing down and thinking about all the things that I really wanted and what was most important, what was not as important. And what I realized for me, and this isn't a choice that everybody makes, right, is being willing to let go of, I had all these businesses, I had 5 companies, 175 employees, and I literally said, it's time to cut the ties. For me, I want to get my health in order. I want to be a dad. I did not want to be one of those dads that was an absentee dad. And I was seeing the pattern that potentially I was heading in that type of a direction if I kept at this the way I was going. And it was around that time, about a year later, I think, that we got a chance to see each other, and you reaffirmed that. And I remember the questions you got me to ask. What do you want, right? What do I want? What do you stand for, and who are you, right? And we've talked about those, so we're not going to go into those today. But as a foundation for you, overall, I challenge you, where you're at today is a direct result of the choices you made today. Just like that example of someone being heavy, that's led you here. Well, let's not focus on your past. Let's look at where we can help you go, right? And ultimately, I know what makes you different is you help people look at where they're at, look at where they want to go, and then go look at how they can bring their positive of their past forward, right? And help understand some of the bad parts of the past versus dwelling on the past.
Right. Yeah. I think it could actually do more harm than good to just immediately jump into someone's past, because you could end up re-traumatizing someone, or they can re-traumatize themselves, or they get stuck and mired and they don't have any new ways of dealing with it.
And speaking of new ways of dealing with it, if you're ready to transform your life, your business, your relationships, the significance, the freedom, the independence, we'll be right back with Dr. Cristy Lopez here on growthtofreedom.com. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com, the show that helps you disrupt the status quo in your life, business, relationships, and we're doing that today. We've got Dr. Cristy Lopez. By the way, if you don't know who Dr. Cristy Lopez is, it might be a good idea to tell you who she is. She's a psychologist, she's a coach, she's a counselor. She helps people in transition to help them improve their life, business, relationships. She's been on Dr. Phil. She's been on the show Downsized. She's a regular guest expert here with us every couple of weeks, in fact. And we're blessed to have her. I'm grateful to have her a part not only of the show, but of my life. She's gotten to know me, my wife, she knows of my kids as well. And so to summarize the first segment of the show, we've been talking about Mastery 2.0, having your playbook for personal power, right? Having the ability to go out and set a standard, a new standard, a next level of standard in your life as far as your ability to have confidence, clarity, faith, freedom, independence, and a whole lot more, right? And that's what this show's about, bringing that to you on a silver platter. Now, you get to choose what a la carte you want to eat. And some will make sense today, and others things will make sense down the road. And it's funny because that statement that the teacher will appear when the student is ready is so true. Because you'll hear this today, and if you listen to the show in another 6 months, you'll hear something completely different that you can be applying in a different, unique way that will help still continue to transform your world. So I want to dive back into what we were talking about. It's important to have a good reference point of where you're at today. Look at really where you want to go and set your sights on that type of a framework versus getting caught up in the past, right? Yeah. So touch on that and expand on that a little bit, Dr. Lopez.
Okay, yeah. And the approach that I have for therapy and coaching is this exact mastery, personal power approach, because again, it's not that I am fixing somebody or I am giving you the fish. It's I am teaching you these skills and processes. So I find it more helpful to really get a good evaluation assessment, a picture right now. And actually, I have people do a lot of exercises like homeworks, but really they're life works, because this is stuff that you are doing in your life. So I have them do various different things. A lot of them are writing, but I also even have them do drawings. Okay.
Oh, sure.
So so this is how I start, is we need to know where you are right now. So we need to know all of the pieces. What are we working with? What's going on internally and externally, like environmentally. So we get a snapshot of what's all going on right now. Then you need to know and have a very clear in mind picture and the cognitive pieces of where are you trying to go, because it's very hard to meet a goal if you don't know where you're trying to go.
Now, if someone's struggling with, really identifying where they want to go, where does someone, like, as you're watching, as you're listening, right? Maybe that question's in your mind, and maybe for you it's easy, right? But for others, they might be going, well, what should I shoot for? Like, how much is too much, right? We have these little voices of doubts that creep in.
Yes.
So speak to a starting point of thinking of how they can think about their bigger future, of going after really what it is they want. Not what other people say, but what they really want.
Yes, and what does that actually look like? And so I always tell them, so we do the current one and then we do the future one, but I tell them a realistic future, not just rainbows and unicorns, like a realistic future. And a lot of times people have difficulty, just like with those questions. They have very great difficulty and they struggle with it, but that's how you learn. And I'm not giving them, hey, this is what the picture of your life should be. I need you to do the work, and I can help you do the work if you're stuck, but I just need you to at least start. Like, you need to get it going.
And speaking of that, because I've gone through this process with you, and so maybe you've gone through this process too, and I found myself in judgment, right? And also judging, not only thinking, okay, well, am I really going after like the things I should? Okay, but what's she gonna think, right, about what I'm choosing here? So I want to challenge you to stay out of that. What would you say to someone that has that little voice, maybe not of doubt, but of judgment going on as it relates to how they perceive their bigger future too?
Yeah, well, and that's part of the thing of the therapy thing. A lot of times people do say and are hesitant that, like, oh, what is my reaction going to be, or how am I going to think of them, or if I'm going to judge them. And that again is not what this is. Now, I can definitely give you feedback, based on psychological research of, hundreds of thousands of people over, decades. I can let you know those kinds of things, but I tend to talk about it in terms of like health. Okay, what is healthy? So I have conversations with people so that they can define this for themselves. But if somebody comes with something completely off the wall and dangerous, I'm not going to just not say anything. I will bring up like, well, that's a bit interesting, and then I'll kind of help them to see why maybe that might not be the most healthy thing, and then help them to see what may be the more healthy thing. But ultimately, it is the person's decision. You are ultimately responsible. I can definitely help and guide and present. And that is what I'm doing. Okay, so there's a lot that I'm doing. Ultimately, it's your decision on your part.
And I remember going through it with you, and one of the ways that I don't know if I tricked my brain of this or where I learned it from, or maybe it's even from some of the stuff that I've taught, working with over 30,000 clients and 3,000 personal coaching clients too, was mentally, right? So I think it was 6 areas: mentally, physically, socially, spiritually, financially. I'd add the new link, which is emotionally. Right? And thinking about, 3 years from today, what do I see myself doing mentally? Like, one of my big things personally is I like to feed my soul with a lot of nourishment related to education. So like, I'm constantly reading books, 2 books a month or 2 programs a month. So mentally, 2 books or 2 programs a month was an example I seem to recall having in our exercise. Physically, at that time I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am today, and that was one area that I wanted to transform. So first it was 10 pounds, because you can't get to 60 until you get the first 10. So I start with these bite-sized chunks, because you can't eat an elephant at a time, and so on, right? Mentally, physically, and then went through each one spiritually, and started notating what did I want those things to look like, say a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, in these bite-sized chunks, to start coming up those pieces. Now create the holistic approach. So I don't know, speak to that a little bit before we go to break here.
Well, and that's the thing too, is when I have people work on this stuff, it's a process. So I always tell people, don't feel like you have to come with your, exercise and it's set in stone, because it really shouldn't be. You are continuously progressing. That's the whole idea. But you at least need to start it, because it's like momentum, okay, in physics. Okay, once you start something going in the direction you want it to go, now you're going to have a lot easier time doing that, and you're going to be way more successful in actually achieving that. And then that actually starts kind of, it's dynamic and it moves and it grows and it shifts, but you're all going in the right direction and you're moving forward something. So but you have to get it going, okay? And then it's not worried about like, what do I think, or judging or things like that. It's, hey, where am I now? Where am I trying to go? Let's figure out the best path there. And how can we be effective and learn these skills that'll help you get towards where you're going, and as you keep making your future goals. Once you get in a good spot and you're kind of on a roll and you've learned these new ways of coping and dealing and processing and all the stuff that happens, now maybe we can go back to let's go back to the past now, because what contributed to why you ended up in the place you were, and probably repeating these patterns. But now you're going to be more effective in dealing with it, instead of the same ways when you were younger. You didn't know how to deal with things so much, and usually you would take on unhealthy ways of trying to deal with that. If you don't learn these new skills, you're going to do the same.
And we want to keep you from doing the same, because it is about progress, not perfection, right? And what would it be worth for you to truly get mastery in your life, right? To have your playbook for personal power. And I want to challenge you right here, right now, to start thinking, where are you today? Where are you going mentally, physically, socially, spiritually, emotionally, and financially? And when we come back, we'll have more with Dr. Cristy Lopez on mastery and personal power. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com. Today's show is about disrupting the status quo, disrupting your status quo for your bigger future, to transform your life, your business, and relationships. We've got Dr. Cristy Lopez. To summarize the first two segments of the show, we've been talking about the concept or the theme of mastery 2.0. Yes, you can skip right by 1.0 and go to 2.0, and it's your playbook, right? Your foundation for personal power. And it starts with you and identifying, where are you now? Where are you going? And then ultimately, how are you going to get there? Right? And having a pathway to be able to do so, and then start looking at your past at that point and bring the positive of the past forward and look at reducing, the past mistakes, right? And not dwell on them, not fall into the guilt pattern or what you started to explain was people living in their past. Right. Versus carrying forward their good parts of the past forward. And I've heard Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach talk about this same idea and some of the common misconceptions or myths, right, we've been addressing. The question, that voice of doubt, am I crazy? Am I normal? Am I a bad person? The whole point of, you asking, why now, right? I mean, now is your time. You deserve it. You're a winner. You're a champion. And now is your time to experience your biggest breakthroughs. Now, at the break, we had a question from our video engineer, which is Matt, and he asked a great question, actually. He says, I'm doing all these things, and how do I hone in and focus on it overall? Or, I'm doing meditation, I'm doing this thing, I'm doing that thing, and you brought it up that it's a pathway. So speak to that a little bit to kind of bridge all of this and bring it all home.
Yeah, I think the way I took his question was he was talking about the things that he's been doing, which are behaviors, but how does that relate to where he's trying to go? So when he was bringing the examples up, then that's what I was saying is like, that's the pathway, because you need to have a clear and comprehensive understanding of where you are, and then the comprehensive understanding of where you're trying to go, and then all of those things that he was saying that he was doing, which are really great, that's the pathway. So then that's the how do I get to this goal? And then it is helpful to have short, medium, and long-term goals, and then to also realize and know those things are dynamic and they will start shifting. So you will end up achieving pretty much the picture of what you were trying to achieve, maybe even quicker than you thought, and realize when you're there, you know what? This is great and awesome, but guess what? Now I have all these other things that I would also like to add to my future. Okay, so then you kind of like you do that work again because you really have to be in the mindset of where you're trying to go to be able to be successful to get there. Because if you're stuck in the past or in the what you're doing wrong or what's not so healthy or somebody else's, you're going to have a real hard time getting there. So you need to really be clear in that, because that's what's informing your path.
And we want to help you clear that path, because there's no sense in trying to go after a goal with a 2,000-pound anchor tied to your leg.
Yes.
Which is what a lot of us, I've done it,
Yeah.
right? You've probably done it. We want to help
Yeah.
shatter through that. So I want you to start right now,
Yeah.
identify where you are today, then look at where do you want to go. You know, we can listen to some of our past episodes where we talk about needs, because it's my interpretation that when you decide where you want to go, if you build in where you want to go as it relates to your needs, right? You know, we've talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Tony's, you know, his 6 basic needs of certainty, uncertainty, contribution, growth, love, connection, and significance. And if we can paint the picture of where we want to go as it relates to filling those needs, now have rituals to help us get there, well, now we just have a better feeling overall. We have, you know, in a technical sense, accomplished mastery.
Yes.
Emotional mastery, which at the end of the day, I'm thoroughly convinced today that when you have emotional mastery today, Dr. Lopez, you can also have financial independence. You can have, you know, so many things.
Freedom of all kinds.
Freedom of all kinds.
Yeah.
But if you don't have emotional mastery, how many people do we know that you've met, that I've met, that have great financial success, but they lose it, right? Or they're not happy,
Right.
or they're freaking miserable, right? See it every day.
Yeah.
Why? Because at the end of the day, it's that emotional mastery piece. It's like the linchpin that I think. It's like my kids, you know, they love this little game, Jenga.
Oh, yeah.
And we play the
Yeah.
game, you pull the block out and it all tumbles. I feel like this is the key link that brings it all together. And that's really
Right.
what you teach, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's actually kind of a lot of where the coaching clients have in common is they have usually achieved what seems to be great success. Okay, so they usually have gotten to great places in their lives and their businesses and all these kinds of things, but it tends to be like lopsided. So like that's where they have been able to excel, but yeah, maybe their personal life isn't so great, or their own emotional life isn't so great, or their spiritual life, or all of these different things. And so it's like they were able to achieve success in one area with anchors, like what you're talking about, like with these anchors of other things on them. And now you can learn how to lift those anchors and be even more successful while you're free at the same time.
Free at the same time, mastery at the same time, the ability to be able to go out there and make a difference, to contribute, to be able to go out and, you know, move the dial. And when we come back, Dr. Lopez is going to go deeper into mastery, the playbook for personal power, and more here on growthtofreedom.com. Welcome back to growthtofreedom.com. Let's summarize the first 3 segments of the show. This show is about you disrupting the status quo. It's about innovation. It's about you and your bigger future. It's about Mastery 2.0. Yes, you can fly right by 1.0 to 2.0. And we're going to show you and give you some of the steps to be able to do just that, and how to have your playbook for personal power. We've been talking about identifying where you are, where you want to go. And I want to dive in, Dr. Lopez, into the idea of things that get in the way. When I've worked in building companies, one of the things we've talked to, you know, the sales and marketing representatives about is, you know, really anticipating the objections that are coming up, or the frequently asked objections or misconceptions that come up as it relates to your company's products or services, as it relates to your positioning. And I liken that similar to coaching or therapy in many ways. Is, you know, you have a plan. You go, here I am. Here's where I want to go. These are my goals. These are my objectives. These are the outcomes that I want. This is the thing I'm passionate about. I'm going for it. But guess what? It's not a straight line. Things do come up. Things get in the way. And there's people who, you know, get knocked off track. They get sidetracked. They take right curves. Right. You know, I've fallen off the wagon on many things in many different ways, like maybe you have as you're watching or listening. I'm sure you've seen this too. So to me, it's like, okay, what can people do to anticipate the objection, if you will, or the things that'll get in the way, or the things that'll come up? So speak to that and what someone can do to have a pre-set, reset type of plan in place to prepare for those things that do pop up inevitably.
So I tell people from the beginning, like, therapy is not like you start here and you just go like that. Okay. It is up. I know. I know. And I don't have a magic wand. Okay. It is going to be up and down or back and forth. But I always say, but it's like what you typically would hope for.
I thought you were the good witch.
Okay. There's many things I could say that, but I won't. Okay. So I'll tell people it's like what you generally would think for the stock market. Like it's going to go up and down, but hopefully it's trending the right way or the way you want it to. That's kind of how I see it. And I let them know it's necessary. It is necessary for you to have the ups and downs and the back and forth because there's like 3 main areas that I'm teaching people. I am teaching them how to prevent problems. So yeah, that'd be awesome. If I could prevent problems and struggles and all of this stuff, then why wouldn't I want to do that? Well, yeah. So let's learn how to prevent, and as best you can, as much as you can, as thoroughly as you can, how can you prevent things? But nobody is perfect and you don't have control over the whole world.
Right.
Sorry again. So then you need to know, well, what to do when things start going off track. So how to intervene. So then I teach how do you best and effectively and more quickly and thoroughly intervene to get it back on track. But it is going to go off the rails. You don't, just because you go to therapy or coaching, you don't all of a sudden become perfect and never have a problem again. And you're not.
Isn't that true?
Yeah, and you can't control it. You can't control, the external world. So you have to learn how to recover then, because there are plenty of things that get in the way, both externally and internally. And even the things that are external, for the most part, it goes back to an internal issue. Because when I get somebody that calls, especially like for couples, so when I get one partner that calls and then they're kind of debating on whether they want to come independently or by themselves or as the couple. And I talk to them about that because you really need to know how you're going to do this. Because if you come by yourself and you start progressing and growing and your partner isn't in on it, usually things in the relationship will get worse because people don't like change. And if they don't know what you're doing, especially if now all of a sudden you're being assertive and confident, communicative, you're expressing yourself, you are not allowing certain things to happen. Like when you learn all of these things, it disrupts what was happening there. So you need to, you need to know.
So what Dr. Lopez is saying is if you're in a relationship, as the old Bible proverb goes, be equally yoked, right? Equally yoked. Otherwise, you will perish in one way or another, disrupt, innovate. So we don't want to see that happen to you, so follow her advice.
So if you're having something going on externally, this still comes back to you internally, because now this goes to boundaries and things like this, because what are you willing to accept or not accept? Okay. Oh, let me say this one. I am not in the business to make better victims.
Ooh.
Okay. This is one of my huge things. So I'm saying that because sometimes people will be talking about the environment, whether it's a work environment or it's a relational environment or something like that. And it's almost as if what they're actually asking me to do is how can they better handle abuse even, or how can they better handle this not so great or healthy environment? Now, this is when it comes back to you, because what are you willing to accept or not accept? Because you probably want to change your environment then. You probably want to do something about your work situation or about your romantic relationship or even your family relationship. There's no rule. So this comes back to people's thoughts again about being a bad person. There's no rule that says you have to engage in a relationship with somebody, especially if they're abusing you or they're manipulating you or they're unhealthy. There's no reason why you have to do that. But a lot of people, because of this other stuff that's going on with them that we need to work out, they kind of are almost asking me, how can I better accept abuse? And I let them know, I'm not in the business of making better victims. You ultimately can choose what you want to do. But I want you to be conscious and aware of what you're doing then. Because if you are consciously choosing to be, in this situation, or you're constantly choosing this kind of thing, then that's all it is. Then you just need to know that that's what you're doing.
And as you're watching or listening, one of my mentors years ago, I forget which one, so I don't want to not give credit where credit is due. So one of my mentors said, you become who you hang around most of the time. So if you're in abusive relationships, you'll likely become more abusive. If you're in positive you'll likely become more positive. And so you become who you hang around. Choose wisely. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying, and you gave me permission through some different things I've been through over the years, choose wisely and choose what you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very important, isn't it?
And a lot of people don't know or realize that they are actually being abused or manipulated, because I think the general population has an idea of what that means, and that's usually kind of the very extreme version of it. So they don't even realize that this is what's been happening. Okay, now this is why it goes back. Now this is the part that goes back to the past, because usually when people find themselves in those situations, they have encountered that when they were young. Okay, and that's why they don't really know or realize that that's really not healthy. So when you get to the more extreme versions of this, yeah, there's a lot when it comes to, the bigger idea of abuse and things like that, because you've got basic physical safety and things like that. But I'm talking about more a little bit the emotional abuse, psychological abuse, but it even, comes out spiritually, financially, like these kinds of things. So a lot of this, again, is work on where are you now, where are you trying to go, how can you get there, and then, it's helpful to come back here, because what led up or contributed to this happening, what's kind of underlying this, the needs thing you brought up, a lot of that is from back here. Okay,
right.
So now that you can identify what those things are and kind of what happened back there, okay, so you have this potential need, this real potential need for something that was lacking here. But now how can you provide that for yourself, or put yourself into situations, environments, or with other people where that can be met in a healthy way?
And we want to show you how to do it in a healthy way. I mean, as we were preparing last night, all of us are going to face curveballs. And it's not whether we do. It's not whether we're going to get sidetracked, fall off the wagon. The question is how we respond to it. Mm-hmm. And are you going to respond? Are you going to react? Are you going to curl up in a ball and basically vanish for a while with that? And we want to help you eliminate, or minimize is probably the right word, all of that happening. I remember when I was 16, we were talking about how I got, one of the pathways that got me to where I am, and started this journey and my fascination with psychology and technology and human responses to things. And when I was 16 years old, I had a baseball coach who told me, he says, Dan, I'm not going to sell you to any colleges because you're playing for this other coach who was a Hall of Fame coach in Michigan. And there was some other backstory to it, but long and the short of it is, it put me in a crossroads. Okay, what am I going to do? My family, at times we were on welfare. We weren't financially well off. The only way I was going to have a chance to go to school was either to get a scholarship or play pro ball and get paid. And that was it. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, what am I going to do? And I don't even know what drove me to, I think it was a book, Think and Grow Rich, that my dad had introduced me to, and there was a section in there about selling yourself. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I created a cover. First I chose the colleges, profiled 100 to 200 colleges that I thought would be great colleges for me to go to. Then I created a letter, then a package, and it had all my credentials. I think it had some video highlights and some different things. And we shipped it out to these colleges. And what happened, by mistake, is all the responses. I mean, there were hundreds of responses coming, of 150. I bet you we got 80 to 90, maybe 100 responses back. The unfortunate part is many of them were going to my high school coach, so they were getting ditched. Yeah. And I found this out, and I had to pull some of them from there. And then I changed the second letter and I made it come to me and or the summer coach, so that they could be responding. Now I ended up having some injuries and so on, but what it taught me is don't leave destiny in someone else's hands. Right. Now I was 16.
I know, that's really awesome.
Right?
That's great.
And I think of, and I didn't even remember this story till like a week ago, thinking through well, how did I actually even get here? And it was through an exercise at Strategic Coach. But I think what you're saying ties in with this so well is you're going to get objections, you're going to get obstacles, you're going to get roadblocks. What is the positive channel to be able to handle this? What is your recovery plan to deal with it?
Right.
And having a support team and other people to talk to is so important. So before we wrap up, how do people reach you? How do they find out about your incredible coaching, the things that you do? I know you've worked with thousands of clients. You've got opportunities to work with you now. How do they reach you? Where do they go to do that?
So I'm local to Phoenix, so my phone number is 602-323-7824, 602-323-7824. And then I have a website, which is www.CristyLopezPhD.com. There's no H in my Christy, so CristyLopezPhD.com.
No H in the Christy.
Right.
That's right. So I want to encourage you to go visit Dr. Lopez. Call her at 60. By the way, you don't have to be just in Phoenix to work with her. She
Right.
does. She works with
True.
people worldwide. So you can call her to set up an opportunity to understand more about what she does. She'll do a consultation. Then you can identify if you're a right fit. You can go to 602-323-7824. That's 602-323-7824. Go check out her site. She's got some incredible resources there, articles. You can see some of the snippets from Dr. Phil and so on. You can go to Cristy, Cristy, LopezPhD.com, CristyLopezPhD.com. And what would you say in closing, action steps that our viewers, our listeners can take from today's show to put in place to begin the journey with their playbook for personal power and mastery?
That there is no reason to be stuck, because that's my other thing. I'm not in this business to watch people being stuck, because there is so much stuff that we know to do to help people and guide people. And I mean, this is, again, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people over decades. There's no need to be stuck, but you need to have a plan. So this is the playbook. And I actually have my clients bring notebooks. Like, we create the playbook as we do this whole process. So these are the skills. These are the things that you learn that you can implement, but you have to do the work. But if you do the work, things will change.
Do the work and things will change and improve. And we want to show you how to get unstuck, because you deserve it, right? You're a winner. You're a champion. You're the best. And you know what? Dr. Cristy Lopez can help you. I want to encourage you to go visit her site at CristyLopezPhD.com. Call her at 602-323-7824 and get on the path to greater mastery and personal power.
Yeah.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can you believe our segment's over already?
Yeah, I know. There's always so much, and then we don't even get to. We get at the little tip of it.
It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here again with us, and I look forward. We'll have you on soon again.
Oh yeah, well, it's always an honor to be here, and I'm glad that you bring up these very important topics. And again, there's so much that we know out there to work with people, to help people. Some of this you can kind of even find on yourself with the self-help stuff, but there's no need or reason to be stuck.
And no reason to go at it alone. Yeah. Find a great coach.
Yeah.
Find a great mentor. Find a great mastermind type group, a collaboration group, if you will. In your area called Dr. Lopez, find one, because I can share with you from my experience over the last 2+ decades is that you don't have to go at it alone. You don't have to be stuck. And being stuck sucks. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you don't have to be there, but it takes you putting together some actions. So I want to thank you for being with us today. If this show has resonated with you in some way, I hope you'll repeat after me. I'm a winner. I'm a champion. I'm the best. I deserve it, and you do. And you know what? Now is your time for greatness. Now is your time for mastery. Now is your time for personal power. We'll see you next time. Seize the day. We'll see you next time on growthtofreedom.com.